Hello, juniors, and welcome to another in a series of short video lectures regarding problem solving. So today we're going to take a few minutes to examine the importance of learning this particular skill, as it'll be a very important asset for you in your career as a social worker. So as we talk about problem solving, just want you to be prepared to maybe take some notes so that we will spend some time in class doing a brief review of these particular skills, as well as there will be an exercise that you will need to complete in class as well as it relates to this particular topic. And so we're going to, without further ado, move forward. So I'll be switching off my camera and we'll be moving towards the slides. So basically we need to start by talking about what problems actually are. And so for the purpose of our exercise in this learning on today, problems are difficult situations that we don't know exactly what to do about. So in other words, when you get up in the morning and you find out that your car won't start and you have to be at an appointment 30 minutes ago, that's an example of a difficult situation that you don't know what to do about. In time, you may figure out what needs to actually happen in terms of resolving that, but at the moment you're pretty much at a loss. And so wanting to really understand that that's the format or the focus that we're talking about when we're thinking about problems. Why it's important for you to learn problem solving skills are these four answers here, in addition to one of the most important ones, in that you having good problem solving skills will make you a valuable asset to your employer, to folks who are connected with you on a regular basis, and especially your clients, as well as this becomes a skill that you will actually be able to share and teach them as well. But the main four reasons are looking at getting rid of your automatic responses. Automatic responses are the things that we typically do when we find ourselves in stressful situations. So how we normally react when people are mean to us or yell at us might be what you would actually refer back to. Problem solving also gives you the ability to think and to choose what the best solution is for how you resolve the issue, as opposed to actually be put in a situation where you do what you've always done. You'll be able to look at getting along with others, and finally you have more control over the situation and what the actual outcome will be. There are 8 steps that we're going to spend some time reviewing today as it relates to looking at what's needed in terms of how you resolve problems. And so we will go through them one by one with some examples of what you can expect or what will need to happen. So the first step is stopping and thinking. It's about really being able to compose yourself when you're in the midst of a situation where anxiety might be high, or you're finding yourself starting to respond emotionally. So self-talk basically is a strategy of, and we do it all the time, just talking to yourself in your head about, you need to slow down, you need to take a deep breath, you need to think about what's going on and ask some questions and answer these questions. So being able to get to a quiet place to calm down and to stop, and then to think about identifying what the problem actually is. To satisfy the answer to that question in terms of what is a problem, you need to be able to answer 2 basic questions. You need to know what's happening and who is involved. You need to also know what you're thinking at this particular point in time and how you feel about it, and to put that into a problem statement. Here are some examples of problem statements, and so you think about what are good statements and what are not good statements. So if you had to think about, I hate the cops, or my kids really piss me off, or I'm frustrated because I can afford the tuition but not the books, men are creeps, I'm worried because my car won't start, I'm going to be late for group, my boss doesn't like the way I work. If you start to analyze these particular problem situations and think about which ones answered both questions, who's involved and what's happening, you'll see clearly that I hate the cops is not a problem statement, because we don't have enough information to ascertain what's going on. The second one, my kids really piss me off, it's also another one that you can't really resolve, as well as men are creeps, as well as my boss doesn't like the way I work. You don't have enough information. So to identify a problem, you have to answer the 2 questions of who's involved and what's actually happening. I'm frustrated because I can afford the tuition and the books gives you a clear definition of what's going on, as well as I'm worried because my car won't start and I'm going to be late for group. The next step in this particular process is identifying the goal. And so once you've recognized what the problem is, it's about then looking at what the goal needs to be to resolve the issue. The goal has to meet 3 criteria. It needs to be simple, realistic, and positive. And so if we look at the statement that's in front of us, it talks about a person really needing to pay a $200 fine, and the goal being actually to resolve that particular fine with the court. So here's some examples of goal statements. And remember, the criteria is being simple, positive, and realistic. And so number 1 talks about, I want Jan to say she's sorry and to leave me alone. I want Jan to believe that I did not take the money. I'm going to yell at her and walk off the job. So when you start to look at the note at the bottom, it talks about, number 1, not a good goal because it's not realistic. You know, is Jan in a position with you where she's going to actually be able to leave you alone? Probably not. Number 2 is a better alternative in terms of it's simple and it's realistic. It's about walking through the steps then to actually have this person to recognize what has actually occurred. And then number 3 is not positive, and it doesn't help you or Jan in the long term. So some things to keep in mind in terms of examples of what a good goal statement would look like. You also need to be aware of the information you need. So as you encounter this difficult situation, as you're working through what a goal might be, you need to also know and make note of who's involved, what's going on, where, when, how, and how the other person is feeling, as well as how you're feeling, because these are all very important factors in terms of how you would actually proceed to the next step. So making sure that you actually have some notation around all of those particular parameters are going to be very important. The next step in the process is to identify your choices. And so if we go back to the $200 fine in the warrant, we have a goal we know in terms of getting it resolved, and these are the choices that will help you get to your goal. And so you can look at all of these items here in terms of items or choices that you can make that would actually help you resolve your problem situation. But notice that each one of these actually also comes with a consequence, which we'll talk about just shortly. So the consequences for those particular items are as follows. So the consequences also need to be identified for consequences for you as well as other folks that it may impact as well. And so when you think about borrowing the money, it's about then not having or having to pay the money back, and then others being put out, getting drunk, possibly driving in DWI, making everyone angry. So as you look at and evaluate each of the consequences, you need to recognize that for each of the consequences, there are consequences for you in terms of what might happen if you should make that option, as well as it also will impact others as well. And so you need to always keep that in mind to make sure that things are as positive as possible. Finally, after you have looked at all of the particular choices that are available to you, it's also then about, at that particular point, looking at picking and selecting the choice that has the fewest amount of obstacles for you. And then finally evaluating whether that choice works. So if you were to actually look at picking up, let's say, a temporary job for a couple of hours to make the extra money to pay the court fine, when you evaluate that, was that something that actually worked? Did it actually hurt others? And what did you learn about yourself in terms of how to problem solve? So the evaluation piece is always very critical in terms of looking at the choices that you have made. And finally, let's talk about when to actually work on a situation or problem situation or when not to. And this last piece is called the invisible step. And so it basically enlists the first 4 steps of the problem solving piece in terms of stopping and thinking, asking what the problem is, looking at your goal, and then asking yourself whether the invisible step, which is basically to decide when to ignore a situation and when to move forward, is the next step. So the criteria for making the determination about whether you need to invoke the invisible step is to ask these 4 questions. Will it keep me upset? So is this situation that's currently in front of me, is it something that will continue to bother me for weeks and days and times on? Will it keep happening? If I don't do something now, will there be a propensity for things to continue to happen in this manner? Does it affect someone that I care about? Is it going to have an impact for my family, my relatives, people who I work with? And then finally, will it impact my future? And so when you ask these particular questions, and if the answers to all of these particular questions are actually no, then the reality of the situation is that this might be a situation which you might actually choose then to ignore. So I thank you for your time and attention. We will be reviewing these particular items in class, as well as there will be an exercise that will go along with this particular process. And so just want to make sure that you have the steps in front of you that are clear about what needs to happen as you're venturing problem solving. And remember that problem solving is an important skill that you need to be able to master, as well as to be able to teach your clients to master in the future. Thank you.